Discover, engage, elevate. Artifact with Joshua on Al FM podcast.
The sound of Arabia.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have with us in the studio a very honored guest, Her Royal Highness Princess Nourah AlFaisal Al Saud. It's our honor to have you, Your Royal Highness. And thank you so much for joining us at Al FM on this podcast called Artifact.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me and for inviting me. It's always a pleasure. I never miss any excuse to talk.
And we are one of those people, or we are one of those groups of people who have been graced by your presence today in the studio. Please, Your Royal Highness, can you tell us about yourself? What makes you you, and what brought you to where you are today?
So first of all, I think I'm a real example or product of the environment that I was raised in. I think also of the travels and of the education that I was afforded and the support I got really from my family in terms of education, in terms of, exposing me to culture and all of these things. First and foremost, when I think about myself, and in the purest form, I think of myself as a designer. And I think that in its simplest form across the many fields that I've been blessed to be able to work in, that's exactly what I am. I'm a designer. So designing is about finding solutions and finding, new ways of solving problems. And I like to hope that that's what I do.
All right, well, tell me about the environment. You said you were a product of your environment. What was that environment?
Well, I was lucky enough to have been raised by a very independent mother. I grew up in on the women in my family are always women who have worked. These are not women who have sat at home. They are people who have founded Jam'iyat al-Nahda, for example, celebrating 60 years this year.
Wow.
Dedicated to the empowerment of women. It was the first NGO in Saudi Arabia, so very proud to have grown up in and around these women. And I find myself as the CEO of Art of Heritage, and Art of Heritage is an offshoot of Jam'iyat al-Nahda, and it's about preserving heritage. So we grew up really as like a generation within my family. We grew up really kind of empowered with the idea that we need to help others, we need to give back to community, that we need to preserve heritage and to really focus on that more than anything. And it's a privilege to do that. And also, my father was extremely supportive. He was a wonderful man, God rest his soul. And I'm not just saying that because I was his daughter.
Of course, even though we know every daughter, usually, as the Saudis would say, every daughter would say something nice about her father.
And I will put on record right now that I was his favorite child, just in case anyone is trying to doubt it.
All right, brothers of Nourah, sisters of Nourah.
100%. No sisters, by the way.
Oh, yes.
So that
brothers,
made it even worse. But he was really empowering. I mean, even, before I started my brand, he was the one who was like, why haven't you started the brand? Why aren't you working professionally? He was the one who pushed me to create my brand in France. He wanted me to compete internationally. And so I learned a lot about taking chances, about dreaming big, about how to treat people from my father. He was a very, very kind man.
Amazing. Tell me, so you're one of the biggest icons when it comes to the design, the art, the heritage community. I understand you have lots of colleagues who are also working with you. I completely understand that. But what I'm trying to say is, within the media and within the public sphere, we hear about Princess Nourah AlFaisal always, treading the way or being one of the kind of road pavers into getting people, enabling people to explore Saudi heritage, Saudi sense of design, Saudi sense of art, Saudi sense of community even. Mm-hmm. And you have a very extensive background in NGOs. Your family set up the first NGO in Saudi Arabia. So when we get back on Artifact, we're going to explore the princess's journey into design. So don't go anywhere.
Artifact with Joshua on Al FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
So tell us, what really, I can see that you were inspired as a child by your family to get to be into the helping space, the service area, but what got you into the art and design?
So again, also
aspect that you're known well for.
So well, again, as well, in our family, there are many artists. If you look at His Royal Highness Prince HRH AlFaisal, he's an artist. We recently lost Prince Badr bin Abdul Muhsin. I grew up around these people. He was also a painter as well as a writer.
The poet.
And a poet. My father, my grandfather, there was this appreciation and understanding of art and of design within the family. And we really did grow up with that. It was, we grew up going to museums, learning about designers and art and all of that. So for me, it was the air that I breathed. It's how... it's how we communicated almost as well. And we were really, really challenged as children to be creative. I mean, this was, of course, before iPads and all of that. So there was a lot more time to be creative in that way. So that's really kind of what led me to it. I never, because when I was coming up, it was a different time. I never really thought that this would be the career that I would have, and our society has changed a lot. So whereas right now, it's very admirable to be a designer, to go in that. But when I was a kid growing up, it really was not the easiest path to tread. I mean, in terms of jewelry design, I think there was only at the time one other jewelry designer who was before me, who was Al-Qasaybi, if I remember correctly. And I remember going to her shop and just being overawed by the fact that her pieces were so beautiful. And to a very late age in my life, I only viewed it as a hobby. I never thought that it was something that I could look at as a career or something that I would do, let alone that I would be successful at.
Well, that type of creative infrastructure, that kind of commercial infrastructure, that kind of economic infrastructure really wasn't available at that time. No. So it wasn't. So it would be abnormal to assume that kind of ability was afforded to you at that time.
It wasn't even a thought, really. I mean, I had been sort of redesigning pieces and things for friends and family for years, for a full 15 years before I had my own brand. And before I felt even confident enough to think that I could have my own brand. Which is why my father was nagging me so much at the time. But I had done things like wedding bands and wedding whole sets of jewelry for friends and family, and had been known a bit for that at that time. But really, no, it was not something that I thought I could do. But when things started changing, and things developed. I mean, now you look back on it and it seems so obvious. But at the time, the idea that everything would change so much, or evolve so much within such a short time was really not unknown. And to see it and kind of be there in the middle of it, I think that's what made me branch out into different things. The opportunity of being able to help and to participate. I think it's the idea of participation that was truly, I think, almost it's like a madness. You want to be part of everything. There's so many amazing things that are happening. You just want to be part of them, and so that I think is kind of one of the things that really spurs me on and has made me, I think, so hardworking because. I lived in Europe for quite a long time. I've traveled a lot, and I'm very, very, very aware that nowhere in the world are you able to create an impact or to make a difference in the way that you are able to do that here, especially if what you are doing is for the greater good.
Absolutely, and I'm so happy that you said that because you could really tell the people with the right intentions. They go really, really far in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah,
some people have extremely humble beginnings, arrive here or are born here or are from here originally, and they have the right intentions. And all of a sudden, within a couple years, wow.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. If you have an idea, if you have some plan or strategy or something, and you can demonstrate the benefit, especially the more people it benefits or the larger benefit of it, you will find, I mean, the first and foremost will be the government. But aside from that, I mean, you will find such a community that will support you to do that and that will help you. It's really, I have seen time and time again, consultants or people who come from the outer world. And they will come here and they are blown away time and time again between, the time period between the pitching of an idea and the time when someone comes and just takes it on and says, right, we're doing this. And so that, whereas in first world countries, although I hate that terminology, but where it would take 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, it can take months here.
Yes, it could take days.
It can take days.
Yes.
Between a pitch and a yes, okay, let's do it.
Yes.
Right?
And and I think what makes it even more fascinating is, so imagine that type of energy and enthusiasm, which is rather new in today's Saudi Arabia, plus a very ancient appreciation for hospitality.
Absolutely.
And so the synergy between those two types of energy really do create enormous masterpieces in Saudi Arabia. Tell me, Your Royal Highness, when it comes to design, I mean, you grew up with design and you grew up in art, but what made, I grew up in sports, for instance, but as you can tell, it really didn't have that much an effect on me. But when it comes to you and your fascination with art and design, what does art and design specifically, how do they speak to you? What makes you want to talk back to art and design?
So I think in the beginning, when I first started, it was about, I would say, product design, object design. It was about beauty. It was about materials. It was about the preciousness of the medium that I work with, which has always been something that I've loved. But as I've grown, my understanding and evolved and kind of learned more over the years. And I'm very much self-taught. So when I find something that I'm the queen of the deep dive. If I find something that interests me, I will deep dive for like a month. Right? I will just kind of bury myself in as much information to understand exactly where it comes from. And once I started connecting the possibility of design as a tool across multiple fields. So design not just of a product, but design of ideas, design of strategies, design of culture, design of, how do you create sort of solutions and strategies and governance, and how does it get into all of these different things? So for me, I fell in love with the idea of being able to research, find the problem, whatever it is, whether it's in a product or whether it's in an idea or a strategy or whatever, identify where the gaps are, identify where there's something that can be done in a better way, come up with something that's maybe unusual or from another field completely, or a different kind of mentality that you wouldn't naturally kind of associate, and coming up with a solution. And for me, I'm addicted to that moment when you kind of figure it out. And whether that's designing an object or a product or anything else, right? It's that moment of solving the problem that I'm addicted to. And so I keep trying to find problems for myself to solve.
And then as you're describing this to me, these mollusks, these clams, when they're creating pearls, they originally start, as you know, way much more better than me, as something small, as a small irritation.
Yeah.
But kind of, it's a meticulous.
That's exactly the perfect example.
It's a meticulous curiosity and a need to do something about this issue. Do you know what I'm saying? For the clam, it's an irritation, but for you, it's a curiosity.
Yeah.
But still irritating to have that much curiosity.
Exactly.
And then that clam goes through so much effort.
Exactly.
To expel this annoying, addictive.
It's a long process.
Very long process.
But when it comes out, you have a precious material.
And it's even.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're talking about filling the gaps, it's exactly what I'm imagining. It's like this fascination. Not like you started with the beauty of this product or the beauty of the material. And then you want to see what more could be done. Okay, now I'm at the next level. Okay, what more can be done? All right, what more can be done? What more can be done? And it goes like on and on and on and on about perfecting and making this more efficient, more interesting.
And it's about understanding. I mean, with design, it's really funny. A lot of times design is removing things as much as it is as adding, right?
Yes,
and that's a big part of design. The fascination is finding the best way to go with a particular object. And for me, it applies to everything. It applies to everything in life. So it's an endless sort of realm of possibility.
And that leads me perfectly to our third question. As soon as we're back, we'll ask the princess to discuss the role of design in our everyday lives. Stay tuned.
Artifact with Joshua on Al FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
We're back to our next question, which is, what is the role of design in our daily lives? I mean, you obviously, from all what we heard so far, you obviously don't care about design for the sake of design. Like, this isn't information for the sake of information or art for the sake of art.
No.
For you, this does have a practical application to your
Absolutely.
everyday life, and you feel that it does for all the humans essentially living on this planet.
I think if you look at the way, and I'm gonna get into the way the world is going now conversation, but the world is evolving, and I'm not just talking about Saudi, so fast. And when you think about AI and all these different tools that are coming in, and how does that affect, for example, our education system? How does that affect what we're teaching our children? How does that affect jobs in the future? What will exist in the future? Because, there's a lot of things that we all know are not going to be here. And how do you prepare a generation coming up in order to be able to deal with that? And so generally, I think throughout the world, we are all agreed that design thinking, creative thinking, and problem solving is the only way, because the only talent that we need really to teach our children now in order for them to thrive is how to continue learning. So we need to teach them curiosity, we need to teach them evolution, and we need them to be able to constantly learn, evolve, and empower themselves. And if you don't teach them that, then the actual pieces or chunks of knowledge are meaningless. It's just more stuff to consume, but you have to give them that. And so I think design is exactly that. Right? And it's the tool by which they will be able to thrive. And we have, especially now going back to Saudi, you have such a young generation coming up, and there's such a need to empower them. And I'm not even talking about the ones who are just going into the job market. Think about the children, who are still in school. What do we need to be teaching them? What do they need to understand? And design thinking, and creativity. This is essential. Otherwise, they are not going to be prepared for the world.
That age-old wisdom, teach a person to fish.
Yes.
I mean, it's still relevant.
It's 100% relevant.
AI might help us solve more problems quicker, but it doesn't mean that we don't need to learn the basis of solving problems.
We're going through another revolution. It's exactly like the Industrial Revolution, and it's happening again, and it will keep happening. And we need to find a way to keep ourselves relevant.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I feel like this is your demeanor is usually calm from all our interactions that we've had, and but I'm realizing when you're talking about AI, you're especially even calmer, it seems. Or is there some fears about AI that you're...
So there are a lot of people who are afraid of AI. I think it's not... I'm not scared. I'm not Elon Musk scared of AI. Let me put it that way. But I'm worried about the speed with which we are enabling our youth. I am very much worried about that. Because there are drastic changes, and there are really important things that as parents we need to be thinking about, and they may not be available, for example, in school, in the curriculum, in this. So really, how do I empower my children? How do I give them the tools that they need? They may not be getting it, because whatever you say, it takes time for change to happen. So how do I empower my kids in the meantime? And I worry about that, because obviously I see lots of, all of these big projects, these beautiful opportunities. And I want them to be able to step into them ready, to live in them, to work in them, and to then kind of take it to extra heights, So I'm very much worried about the human capital and how to get it to the point. And I think what AI is doing is it's shortened that time a lot. And so we really have to get, moving.
So many different stresses really that need to get us, cooperating in the realm of, getting on board with being okay with solving problems, because you have the AI challenge, which is specifically human-oriented challenge. And then you have the environmental challenge, which is another stressor. And so it's really like pushing us into either a breakthrough or into a disaster.
Well, I have to say, I'm maybe a very optimistic person.
Yes, I think that is the right word to use.
General, I'm a very optimistic person, and I have a great deal of faith. We call it iman, and I am someone who every night when I go to bed, I just give it to God.
Yes.
Right? Because definitely I am not going to be able to solve the world's problems, but I can do what little I can. I can come here and I can talk about the things that I think about and I worry about, and somewhere out there someone will hear it and maybe they'll start thinking about it and worrying about it, and maybe they'll look at, for example, what's available. Maybe there's a course, maybe I need to do this, maybe I need to learn this. But in general, for me, AI is a tool. It's not something that's going to come and, destroy humanity or anything like that. I'm not really that science fiction motivated kind of thing. So these are not my fears, but my fear is more about making sure that we are ready.
Amazing. One more thing I want to ask you about AI. And I mean, I didn't prepare this question, but
it's not on the list of questions.
You're getting my gears
yes.
ticking. So we'll be right back on Artifact to discuss AI and art. Don't go away.
Artifact with Joshua on Al FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
So we're back on Artifact, and this is something I always ask our art-oriented people, art and design-oriented people who do interviews with us on Artifact is art generated by AI real art?
So there's two things I want to say to that, because that's very interesting. I remember when it first came out, and even I was one of those people who posted on social media about, where they get the inspiration, where they get this and that. So I have
that post on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I have a friend of mine who works at MoMA. And she specifically...
Museum of Modern Art.
Yeah. And she specifically works with the artists who are working with AI tools and in that kind of medium. And they have a very simple kind of rule, which is the source material needs to be created by the artist, which is 100%. It's a tool. So you make your source material or you source the elements, and then you use AI as a tool. It's just like a paintbrush. It's just like a thing to create your final piece. For me, that's definitely art. I think there's a difference between illustration and graphics and art. In a way, I'm not sure if everyone will agree with me, but I mean, if I'm doing something and I need to create graphics, it is artistic. I need to have an artistic kind of element to it and a creative element to it. I would not define it. Oh my God, I can hear the guys at work coming back to me at this.
I already see the comments.
I know, I can already see the comments. I'm thinking, do I need to finish this or not? But like if I'm doing something corporate as opposed to something that is artistic, then it's different. So it's the same way that I would define the difference between art and design. So graphic design is design. It's not art, but art is art. So there's that emotional kind of thing.
Of course, one is commercial to grab your attention. The other one's
some art is very commercial.
Yes. There is art that's very commercial.
Yes.
You're very right.
Yes.
But I think essentially this is the argument that you're making.
Yeah.
And so tell us, you didn't like the word jeweler.
I didn't like the word jeweler.
And I didn't mean it as someone who's standing behind the counter selling jewelry.
No,
however,
that's not what I meant.
Yeah, I know. But what I'm trying to say is, this just shows how much we don't know about this industry. And you were very eager to share with us your knowledge and experience when it comes to the world of jewelry. And from what I understand is, Princess Nourah AlFaisal is not in jewelry because it's a luxury. You're in it because it has a communicative value that you've been obsessed with since you were
a child.
Yes.
Since I was a child.
And so,
I mean, it's a luxury to be able to be obsessed with jewelry since you were a child.
Absolutely.
Let me just admit that, but yeah.
But there's so many different types of jewelry. I mean, people have the commercial idea of what jewelry is, but people for thousands of years, out of very humble materials, have been making quote unquote jewelry.
Yeah.
Literally hundreds and thousands of years.
Absolutely.
And so tell me, as a person who is a jewelry designer.
Thank you.
Okay, very welcome. And thank you for correcting us. Tell us, what makes jewelry such an important industry from your perspective?
So I know I'm gonna anger some people here. So I think that jewelry has been awarded some importance that is maybe overly. So I'm about jewelry being an expression of love and of joy and of celebration. To me, that's what jewelry is. And it's a special way of doing that, using materials that are rare and that are things. But I'm not one of these people who is like bigger is better, and the bigger the jewel, the bigger the thing. I believe in quality over quantity. Size does not always matter when it comes to these things. You know, people like a big stone or a big whatever, and it doesn't really factor into it. It's about the quality. But for me, I always say that when I think of myself, I like to think of myself like the old-fashioned family jeweler. There are not many of them that exist anymore, but you know, the larger families used to have their jewelers that they used to go to, and on a multi-generational kind of way.
That jeweler that you're mentioning is a jewelry kind of procurer.
Sometimes a procurer. They're a maker.
Okay.
They're a maker. But so, for example, I always say, and I've said this everywhere, so I'm sorry I'm not giving you an original quote, but one of the things that to this day I am still the most proud of is I did the jewelry for a young lady when I was first starting out for her wedding. And then years later, I did the jewelry for her daughter's wedding.
Okay.
And then years later, I did the jewelry for her son's wedding. And you know, if I get to do the grandkids' jewelry as well, then that's it. It's official. I am a family jeweler, right? And so it's the idea of having that personal connection with the family, creating heirlooms, generational heirlooms, creating celebrations of moments that they will carry with them. One of the things that I don't like sometimes with some of the more established jewelry houses, shall we say, is sometimes, you know, when you walk into a jewelry store and like there's this guy with security in the suit and it's all very intimidating, and it's like, I'm here to celebrate like someone's graduation or a wedding, or like, can we just have like a little happiness and joy?
Can someone like smile
why
around
does it
here?
have to be so intimidating,
Yes.
right? It's about happiness. And that's one of the things that I've always loved about jewelry, that I can be wearing something that is a piece of my father or my mother, that is, you know, was my grandmother's, that she wore for many years, that I can carry them with me almost in that way. And that's what I love. It's that emotional connection.
It's the wearability.
It's the wearability.
So it is for you, it is the practical use.
It is. I have done and I can do for a client, because of what I do is commissions, big pieces of jewelry. I especially love when someone, and this is one of my favorite things ever, when someone brings me something that it was maybe a gift and it was large and they can't wear it. And I really believe that jewelry should be wearable. It should be something that I can wear and have fun. And so if you give me something and I then make 4 or 5 different pieces that you will wear on a daily basis, or that you will gift to your children, or that, then that's wonderful, right?
From my perspective, and I mean, I'm obviously not really at the level where I can really appreciate that jewelry that much, but from what I'm understanding from you is you're saying that although jewelry doesn't necessarily have to be so obviously functional,
No.
it still has a practical use
Yes.
in helping people carry around with them something that something that hosts
It's a memory
the
you can
feelings
wear.
and the
It's a memory you can wear.
Yes.
And the other thing is, you know, if I create a piece of jewelry and it's sitting in a safe somewhere and it's never worn.
That's an investment.
But that's the saddest thing
Of
in
course,
the world.
yes.
It's really sad. I'd much rather see something that you enjoy, that you really kind of have fun with.
Yeah, something that you create even new memories with, even though you have that
Exactly.
thing for a specific memory, or for, because of a celebration of a specific relationship or achievement. You also should be creating new memories or relationships with it. And I guess that brings us to a very important question. When we're back on Artifact to discuss the role of jewelry in Saudi culture, stay with us.
Artifact with Joshua on Al FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
We're back with the princess for an important question, which is, what is the role of jewelry in Saudi culture?
I think, we have, especially with gold, for example, I think jewelry it's really interesting when you think about jewelry. I think about it a lot, especially in the Saudi context. And if you go back like historically, and you start thinking about the trade routes and you start thinking about what is jewelry. One of the things that I love about Saudi culture is that sort of nomadic kind of culture and that ability. And I always like to say that, Al-Badu, they were the original, most sustainable designers ever.
Absolutely
because
were.
if they couldn't carry it with them, if they couldn't take it with them, then
Leave
the point? What's the point? And so when I see sort of collections of the old Bedouin jewelry and I see the elements that came from India, from Africa, from all over the world, and it came through those trade routes. And then they took those elements, and sometimes they were coins, Byzantium coins or this, and they turned them into something else. I think about that a lot. I think we carried our wealth with us and on us, and we didn't hide it. We showed it off. I think that tells you a lot about who Saudi Arabians are, what our culture is. We were the original jewelry layers. Everybody is going on about layering jewelry, but we had it like up.
Yes. Well, you mentioned that this is an extremely important point because what you're saying is people, if you walk today in the street in New York, you can't really wear anything luxury. New York, a place with so much security and police in the middle of America. And you're telling me that some people who barely knew how to read and write, actually most of them did not know how to read or write at that time, okay? And who had very limited access to natural resources, were so confident to be wearing the most valuable things on their wrists, on their faces, on their hands, on their feet.
The world was very different then. But you also have to understand, and this is one of the things that I believe we have sustained in Saudi Arabia and in the Arab world as well, in general, the Islamic world in particular. We've sustained this kind of rules of conduct. There's honor, there's, loyalty, chivalry in a way that I don't think exists.
Respect for women, we get overlooked for a lot.
I don't think they even think it exists, but I really don't. I mean, I'm not even going to start that conversation.
But I know exactly what you mean.
But I have never felt unsafe anywhere in Saudi. I've never felt unsafe in my travels, and I have to admit, I haven't traveled a lot or as much as I want to, but within the Arab world, definitely within the Gulf region, I've never felt unsafe.
I want to go back to the role of jewelry in Saudi customs and traditions and culture. That point that you made about, it's not necessarily that they're showing off. They really just have no need to hide it.
They had no need to hide it. It was just ease of transport. and the other thing is also, it's as a dowry, as a family, it showed kind of the status. So it was there was a whole language. It was another way to communicate.
And I think it had to do a lot about generosity.
Of course.
And can you imagine, like, if you're not afraid of losing something to the point where you could just wear it on your face, or you could wear it as like a sleeve, then you're really not that connected, or you're not really attached to it. You can easily just rake it off and give it to somebody.
Absolutely.
You can easily. And so I think this says so much about, the generosity of the people of the Arabian Peninsula.
Yeah.
Even though life was environmentally so hard.
But I think you talk about life was so hard. It was in terms of survivability, but there's a lot of methods and techniques that we city dwellers have forgotten.
Of course. I'm saying from our perspective, no one today would be able, your grandfather was very famous for saying that we could. Do you know what I'm saying? But I'm saying in 2024, when we're sitting here in the air-conditioned studio.
I am ashamed to say I could not live without my iPad.
There you go. That's what I'm saying. If you could just imagine at that time, even though they didn't have the simple creature comforts that we have today.
Yeah.
They were still able to be so comfortable.
Yeah, but they that's all they knew as well. You have to understand that there was a generational kind of resilience inbuilt into these people. They're, to me, the most. I don't know. I think of them as like warriors. I think of them as these kinds of heroes of old, the way that they lived their lives, the way that they communicated, that verbal communication, the beauty with which they spoke is just something, I would say, aspirational in this modern world, I really think. Yeah.
I mean, collectively, they were an archive.
Exactly.
Collectively, they were a library.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
All of it verbal.
All of it verbal. I can't remember a phone number now.
I can barely remember my own number. I have to send it to you on WhatsApp. Let me just look it up really quick. I'll send you my contact sheet, and then hopefully you will still have the attention to save it by the time you receive it in today's world. So stay tuned as we discuss Saudi Arabia's contributions to the global design community.
Artifact with Joshua on Al FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
Bring us a little bit back to design aspect. What do you think about the contribution of the Saudi community to the global community in terms of design? What have Saudis given the global community in terms of design? Being that you're essentially a bridge between your local community and the international community in the terms of design. What do you see? We see a lot of things coming in. What do you think are the things that went out as far as design is concerned?
Well, I will start by saying that we are nowhere near where we need to be when it comes to exporting our talent. And that's the first thing I'll say. It's not because of a lack of talent. It's probably we're just not developed to that point. And I know that the government, through the Ministry of Culture in particular, but also through the Ministry of Tourism, are doing so much in terms of exporting our culture and exporting. But for me, design is one of the key points of cultural diplomacy. And that works both ways. So for me, that's a huge part of how you get to know people. So if I'm an American who is sitting in a restaurant in New York and they are serving Saudi food in Saudi cups and plates, and I'm learning about that culture. That's cultural diplomacy at its best. You can have the biggest posters and the biggest ad campaign, and it's not going to touch me as much as if I love this mug and I take it with me and it's made using 3D printing, but using an element or sand or something from Al-Ula, for example, and that actually won an award a couple of years ago. And they use something like that, and then they're selling it internationally. I'm sitting at home, and I know nothing about Saudi Arabia, but I know that these people made this, and they use 3D printing. And what does that tell me? Well, they're not maybe as backwards as I thought. This design is really beautiful. The color of the sand is gorgeous. Oh, I really want to go to that place to see that. It does more than the biggest publicity campaign.
It's indirectly communicating.
It's directly communicating, but bypassing. It's bypassing the brain, and it goes straight to the heart. And then the other thing is, it's about connecting humanity. It's not about governments or cultures in that kind of official representative way. It's human to human. I find through my work, one of the biggest conversations that I have, and it's been for years and it's ongoing, is, did you really design the jewelry? Yes, I did. Why is your jewelry so European? But it's not. It's minimal, and it's very much based on Saudi nuqosh as much as I can, even the way that I set the stones. It's very
Saudi.
For
our listeners, what is nuqosh, Princess Nourah?
So nuqosh is a patterns. Mm-hmm. So if you've seen the Najdi houses, you've seen the triangles, and that's something that I use even in the way that I set my stones, because it's something that's very familiar for me. And I really like that if you are a Saudi and you look at a piece of my jewelry, you'll feel like there's something familiar, even if you don't quite know why it feels familiar. But it's not a copy paste of culture to the point where, because I am a modern person. I live in a modern world. And so my expression of my culture and using elements of my heritage needs to represent me. It's not that. So that for me is a big deal, because it changes the idea that anything Arabic is arabesque and has all these curly little wordy domey things, and nothing against that. I love that, but we are talking about a different geography and a different culture, still Arabic.
A separate environment.
But a separate environment. And so being able to get people to understand those nuances is something that I can do through my jewelry. And the other thing is, and I have to say this, is people still ask about working in Saudi. And it's still unbelievable to me that they still ask that. But, better than talking about it or whatever. But if they see that you are a working woman and that you are a successful working woman and that you own your business and that you are traveling all over the world to promote your business, you don't need to answer a question or to say anything. You're just an example. And we need many, many more examples. And we have so many. You have Mohammed Ashi as a fashion designer in Paris. He was asked last year. He opened Fashion Week this year in Saudi. Or last year in Saudi, but he also was invited by Paris Fashion Week, officially as the first Saudi to be part of Fashion Week. You have Hunaida Sarafi, who's been working for years. You have Abadia, who is now sold on Net-a-Porter and internationally. You have so many different Saudi designers who are working internationally. And they're not doing anything other than doing their work and doing their best and creating beauty and putting it out there. Artists have been doing this for far longer than the designers, because they were able to kind of cross borders a lot more. And so it's nice now, really beautiful to see these expressions of what is Saudi, what is modern Saudi, how does that translate, what does that look like, and for the world to be able to experience it.
And actually, you mentioned, you mentioned the role of, working ladies, working women in Saudi Arabia. So we'll be right back and to discuss the role of Saudi women in design. Stay tuned.
Artifact with Joshua on Al FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
When it comes to the role of design for Saudi women, what about these women? What role have Saudi ladies played in this? And could you give us an example?
So
you're a Saudi lady, of course, and you've played a role in this, but who else in your eyes do you think played a role?
Well, I'm going to give a couple of really clear answers from the current, younger generation. I won't say young because nobody is young anymore. Not in my they're going to be really angry I said this, but not in my circle.
It's frank.
It's, but for example, you have people like the ambassadors, or what's the female of ambassador?
Ambassador.
Yeah, so Princess Rima bint Bandar, for example, who is a very, very good example of someone who represents Saudi women and what they can achieve and what they can do. You've got, for example, Haifa bint Migrin as well. She was a representative at UNESCO, and now she is an ambassador in Spain. And, these are two women that I'm super proud of. But then, I'm going to be a bit biased now as well. I'm going to say, we touched on it earlier today, but I was really blessed and very lucky to grow up in and around women who have done so much. First and foremost, among them is Her Royal Highness Princess Nourah AlFaisal bin Abdulaziz, and everything that she has done for the empowerment of women. Princess Haifa AlFaisal, Princess Lulu AlFaisal Ifat University. It's unbelievable the work that they have done and continue to do. And Princess Sarah AlFaisal, 60 years anniversary, Jam'iyat al-Nahda, 60 years, and she's still head of the board, huh? It's unbelievable. It's, you grow up around these women who work. Princess Modi bint Khalid as well. She was from Majlis al-Shura. She's the head of Jam'iyat al-Nahda now. When you grow up around these women who work so hard, who are so diligent, who are, those are the icons. Those are the people. And we would not be, my generation would be nowhere without the years of hard work that these women had put in and the example that they have shown of how to just put your head down and do the work. And that's the thing, just do the work. I think they are shining examples. I think there are many more that I did not name. I think if we need to start creating like an archive, we need to do something like an annual celebration of these women. And I guarantee you they would hate it. But it is something, you learn from them. And I hope, that our generation can maybe provide the same for the next generation. And just keep, in terms of women's empowerment, in terms of, there is nothing you can't do if you do the work and if you can dream big enough.
And if you have the right intention.
The right intention, yes. Of course. That goes without saying.
Of course, of course.
I am leaving now after this podcast, and I'm going to Princess Nourah University. Now, Princess Nourah University is, and there's a reason it was named after her. So she was the sister of King Abdulaziz, and she was the reason he was able to create Saudi Arabia, to be honest,
And they're the largest university, women's university in the world.
Of course.
They have their own rail line.
King Abdulaziz used to call himself, and he used to call himself Ana Akhu Nourah.
Brother of Nourah.
And that needs to tell you, that is all you need to know about how proud Saudi men are of the women, and really some of the things that they've done is unbelievable. But your average person walking down the street who is just doesn't have the right information is just that, someone who doesn't have the right information. And so I don't feel like there's any intention behind that. But it's also about like, where are they getting their information and how much real information is unbiased and available. That's all.
And how much effort are they putting into getting the right information?
Do you know what? It's so difficult. Like, you go online now, how do you know what you're getting?
How do you
is
discern?
real?
Absolutely. That is a challenge.
It's so difficult.
That is a challenge.
So how do you know? I don't know. I think there's this superpower that the younger generation have now, where they can tell. Like, they can read the signs, and they've grown up in this kind of... But when I grew up, you watch the news, and the news told you what was happening. And there was no kind of thought that the news was not real, right? So... I think it's a talent that the younger generation have, luckily. And I think what that means is that the younger generation, internationally, not just locally, and I think we can see that now, they don't just accept what they're told. They do search, they do look for, and I think that bodes so well for the future.
Absolutely. I think this generation has the right tools, and they have the right incentives, and they have the right supports. In order to really make a huge difference. So there will be no excuse for them. There's no excuse for them.
As well, I don't know. I'm sure they will come up with their own excuses.
No pressure.
I'm sure they will come up with their own excuses.
Pressure. After a short break, we'll return to Artifact to explore the Saudi aesthetic. Don't go anywhere.
Artifact with Joshua on Al FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
Tell me, Your Royal Highness, many people are talking about the aspects of the newly coined Saudi aesthetic. What do you think that entails? What is the Saudi aesthetic?
I don't know what that is, right? So I know what Saudi heritage is, especially we're quite lucky in that, Saudi is so big, so you have the regionality and you have the different areas. And if you want to think about it in a European format, it's a bit like the Italians, where you have a different dish in every area. It's that kind of thing. And there are things that are unique to the different regions and the different areas, from patterns, from foods, from culture, from architecture, from everything. But what is the Saudi aesthetic in its modern form? I think we're not there yet. It's that we are beginning to export, but I think it's something that will be constantly evolving. And I think we're discovering it now. We're creating it. This young generation of designers, they're creating the aesthetic. I think what's nice and makes me very optimistic is there is for sure a world out there that is curious to discover what it is. So it's a process that I think we need to let it happen in its own time. And I don't believe that defining something really is always the best way to go about it. Sometimes it's just a process.
Really, because most consultants tell us that we need to categorize
No.
everything. We need to have benchmarks.
No, and I hate to admit that I'm a consultant, but no, I don't believe that at all. I think once you define something, then you're assuming that it's that and only that. And I think that's why, and I'm going to get myself in trouble, a lot of consultancy firms maybe don't work as well as they could.
Because it's kind of limiting when you define.
You can't.
It's kind of like drawing a fence. You're putting a fence around something.
Time is moving. Things are evolving. So it's about measuring, constantly measuring and making sure you evolve as well. And so it's a process. It's not a definition. It's not a thing. You can define a process, but you can't define this is Saudi aesthetic. And this is it. And then, 5 years down the line, that's not it. It's something else. So, it's it's a dialogue.
I think the people who talk about this, they're often imagining like this idea of Americana. Is there an equivalent of Americana?
Yeah, but what is Americana?
Exactly.
Again,
Exactly.
Americana. You say Americana, I think 1950s.
Right.
Right?
Right.
It's not gone past the 1950s. It's I Love Lucy.
Right.
Right? It's not past that at all. That's my Americana. And it's not your Americana. And it's not the people who are listening to us. It might be a different Americana as well.
Right, absolutely.
So it's very objective.
But is there so there might not be a Saudi Kana, se, but could we say there is maybe some regional Kanas? Is there a Hijazi Kana? Is there a Southern Kana? Is there an Eastern Kana, Northern Kana, Central Kana?
There are definitely parameters in terms of elements that are 100% regional to area, right? But how those translate in terms of design specifically or design aesthetic is what's going to be constantly evolving. And even those elements will evolve into something else. So there's always that kind of movement. And I'd love to be able to say, to give a simple answer and say it's this and that's it and it's simple. But the second you define something, you're assuming that it's stopped evolving, it's stopped changing. And human beings by nature do not stop evolving, right? So I really think we need to let go of things that are so limiting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of things that are not limiting, we'll be back to discuss the design inspiration of Al Ula. Don't go away.
Artifact with Joshua on Al Ula FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
As you know, Al Ula
Yes.
is a place with very little limitations.
None, as far as I can tell.
What kind of design do you think Al Ula could inspire when it comes to people living in Saudi Arabia locally or people working internationally? What kind of design values do you think people should be looking out for when it comes to being inspired by Al Ula? Or what kind of inspiration do you think Al Ula could provide to the international design community?
Al Ula as a space has already beautifully, especially when you think of the designs and everything that are happening in and around, like for tourism and for people who come in. I mean, it's been done so beautifully. There are so many projects coming up that I can't wait to see. And I think a lot of the identity of Al Ula and what it's doing is about the whole ecosystem around art, the whole kind of design thing. There's this cultural element that is really quite beautiful, and it's very future and forward thinking. I can't wait to see things like Villa Hijra come to reality and to really start seeing those residencies fully formed, seeing those artists and those creatives. It's, for me, a point where you will get that international element mixing and interacting with the local and probably coming up with a whole new dialogue, a whole new aesthetic. So I think that's, for me, a key point where very soon we already have, but very soon we're gonna see a lot more of what Saudi aesthetic or Saudi design possibly can be. In terms of inspiration, I think there's an endless amount of inspiration for architecture. I mean, all you have to do is go online and see how many architects, just for fun, using AI, have created sort of designs for Al Ula houses and just set them in that scene. And it's so beautiful. And I would love to be able to to build one of those here in Riyadh, but unfortunately I don't have those grand, beautiful vistas in front of me, so I'm going to be stuck. But I think it's one of those identifiable hotspots almost within Saudi, and right now it's absolutely communicating with the world. It's really communicating with the world. It is
definitely a hotspot for many, many things. It's a hotspot for archaeology. It's a hotspot for, as you mentioned.
I didn't even get into
absolutely. No, but
yeah,
it's a hotspot for, as you mentioned, design. As you mentioned, art. It has many architectural experiments. I think people who are fascinated and obsessed with sustainability and creativity are really being magnetized by Al-Ula. And as you said, Your Royal Highness, Al-Ula is one of those places where people are actually inspired when they come, inspired by the nature, and inspired by the open spaces. Sometimes
it's my secret getaway space. I absolutely, anytime I'm overworked or crazy, whatever, I run away to Al-Ula for a weekend.
Excellent. You're welcome. It's your second home, of course, Al-Ula. We'll be right back on Artifact to discuss the future of design in Saudi Arabia. Stay tuned.
Artifact with Joshua on Al-Ula FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
What about the future of design in Saudi Arabia? What is the future of design in Saudi Arabia, Princess Nourah?
I really feel, well, I can't tell you it's exactly this or that, but I feel very, very deeply that there is an opportunity in Saudi Arabia because of the way we are looking at things and because of the way we are looking to develop things. There is an opportunity to move forward and evolve in a way, specifically with design, that has not really been seen anywhere else. Because in a lot of fields, especially, there are all these new fields that have opened up to us, and we don't have the burden of carrying the history of the infrastructure that was before. So really, we can start now and jump into the future in a way that others can't. So we can take these tools that are coming up, and you can see that when you see all the possibilities when you attend something like LEAP, or you attend all of these startups, all of these incubators. The possibilities are really, really, really incredible. And I feel like the possibility of Saudi Arabia becoming the starting point or the jumping off point of what the future of design is going to be is really very exciting.
You know, when you mentioned that the Bedouins were the original environmentalists. The Bedouins were the original kind of masters of living in a sustainable way. I think that brings us full circle to the future of Saudi Arabia's contribution to design. Because look, ladies and gentlemen, we've been doing this for thousands of years. We've learned how to exist in the harshest, environments.
And it's not just that. We were always, if you think about the trade routes and everything, we were the center of the universe.
Absolutely.
I mean, universe may be a strong word. Okay, center of the known world at that time. Yes. And everything kind of came through us and traveled through us.
Yes.
And I think we're just taking our rightful place in history again.
Absolutely. So you really are coming full circle. But it's for a different reason or kind of under a different theme.
It's not.
Now it's like it could be, now Saudi Arabia has so much to offer in terms of.
So when I think of Saudi Arabia as we are now, and with all the projects and the things that are happening, I think, and I'm sorry, I'm going to say this, I think we are the land of opportunity. And we've opened up the doors and we've said to the world, welcome.
I completely
come
agree.
Help us build it.
Completely agree. Princess Nourah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I apologize. I keep hitting the...
It's okay. It makes it real. It makes it real. It's evidence that Princess Nourah is actually with us here in the studio.
Also, not professional. Just not very used to doing this.
No, you did a great job. Thank you so much for your time, Your Royal Highness.
Thank you very much.
And we hope to have you again very, very soon.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Artifact.
Thanks.
Subscribe for more great content right here on Al-Ula FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.